you close your eyes. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we come unto thee once again, Father God. Thanking you for your grace and your mercy, and most of all, your love. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for being obedient and doing what the Father told you to do. Father God, we thank you for allowing us all to get here safely, and that you're going to allow us to get back to where we need to go to this day safely. Thank you, Father God. We can't keep enough. Father God, we know that you're going to keep your presence among them to get done what you have appointed them to do. Father God, we just want to thank you for that in your most holy, gracious, and precious name. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. Amen and amen.
Amen. Thank you, Ms. Nickerson. We appreciate your time to bless us here today.
You are welcome.
Next up, we have a proclamation about World Polio Day, and Councilwoman Frida Powell will be reading that for us today. Councilwoman Powell.
Thank you, Mayor. Whereas Rotary is a global network of 1.2 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers who unite and take action to create lasting change in communities across the globe. The Rotary motto, service above self, inspires members to provide humanitarian service, follow high ethical standards, and promote goodwill and peace in the world. And whereas Rotary in 1985 launched Polio Plus, and in 1988 helped establish the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, which today includes the World Health Organization, United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, UNICEF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to immunize the children of the world against polio. And whereas polio cases have dropped by 99.9% since 1988, and the world stands on the threshold of eradicating the disease. And whereas today Rotary has contributed more than the United States 1.9 billion in countless volunteer hours to protecting more than 2.5 billion children in 122 countries, Rotary is working to raise an additional 50 million per year, which would be leveraged for maximum impact by an additional 100 million annually from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And whereas these efforts are providing much needed operational support, medical staff, laboratory equipment, and educational materials for health workers and parents. Now, therefore, we, Mayor and City Council members of the City of Amarillo, Texas, do hereby proclaim October 24th, 2020 as World Polio Day in Amarillo, and encourage all citizens to join us in Rotary International in the fight for a polio-free world. Given under our hands and seal of office this 20th day of October 2020, the Honorable Mayor Ginger Nelson, Council members Elaine Hayes, Frida Powell, Eddie Sauer, and Howard Smith. And Mayor, today we have accepting the proclamation is going to be Mr. Daniel Martinez, who is also a former commissioner for the City of Amarillo, and he is currently the president for Amarillo Rotary Club. And by the way, their club is 104 years old.
Welcome, Daniel. Thank you for being with us today. Would you like to say a few words?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mrs. Powell, for those kind words. On October 24th every year, we stop to reflect that Dr. Jonas Salk, that was his birthday, and he was credited for having found the vaccine for polio that was a deadly killer in the 50s and 60s, as many people will remember. That we took that initiative as a world cause that we would eradicate polio, not just in the United States, but in 1985 started the initiative to eradicate polio around the world. So we have spent over $2 billion as Rotarians with about 19,000 relationships and organizations throughout the world. Afghanistan and Pakistan have the only two live areas where cases are active. An area has to be polio-free for 2 years before the vaccine is not given to the children. It's given to those villages and children absolutely free. Jared Miller is also one of our members in our Rotary Club, and we thank you for your efforts and contribution as well. I'm fortunate to serve as the club president that began many, many years ago in Amarillo. We're probably the longest serving civic club in Amarillo, still very active every Thursday at noon. You're welcome to come and join us when you're available. Thank you for this proclamation. I will present it at our meeting Thursday. Thank you, Councilwoman Mrs. Powell.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you,
We
Mayor.
appreciate all the work that the Rotary does, not just in our city, but nationwide and worldwide.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on then and just start with our agenda. Item 1A is a coronavirus update. Mr. City Manager. Mute.
Yep, I realized it
There you go.
right away. We have with us our Public Health Director, Casey Stoughton, to give us the update. Things continue to be a little bit challenging, and that's probably a little bit of an understatement. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Casey to give us our current condition with regard to coronavirus and to introduce anything that we might have to be prepared for tomorrow as far as the press conference goes. Casey?
Thank you, Jared. I appreciate, that chokes me up. I appreciate the proclamation for World Polio Day. I think it gives us hope during this pandemic, and I'm sorry I'm being tearful right now, but it certainly gives us hope during this pandemic. My grandparents worked hard during the polio epidemic. My grandfather placed artificial limbs and braces on patients who suffered during that polio epidemic, and my grandmother worked in the hospital lab, and she talked fondly of the work that Dr. Salk did in finding this vaccine that really just saved so many of our lives during those polio epidemics, and now we don't have to suffer from polio anymore. And so I appreciate the work that my grandparents did. I appreciate the work that the scientists and Dr. Salk in finding that polio vaccine, and I appreciate the work that we're doing today because viruses do affect our lives and are incredibly serious, and we still have work to do. So during this coronavirus outbreak, I appreciate the work of our public health department, of our hospitals, the scientists that are working day in and day out to find us a vaccine, because in 50 years, we will have a proclamation thanking the work that they did and that we're doing today, because we're going to succeed and we're going to come out on the other side of this as a very strong community. And so I just really want to say thank you to my grandparents and the work that they did during polio. So thank you for the proclamation. I'm going to gather myself together now and read the numbers for today. So thank you. So as of today, we do have 11,874 cases of COVID-19 in Potter and Randall counties. 7,342 cases in Potter County and 4,532 cases in Randall County. We have a total of 7,838 recoveries, and we are thankful for each and every recovery. We are up to 149 deaths in our community, and each of those deaths are tragic. That leaves us with 3,887 active cases. Each of the cases do represent a unique individual. Locally, we have 162 hospitalized patients plus 4 ED holds at our local hospitals. An ED hold is when someone is in the emergency department and they're waiting for a bed in the hospital. We also have 16 patients at the VA, and so we have a total of 182 hospitalized patients. That's the highest number of hospitalized patients we've had to date. The adult bed utilization is at 80.5%, ICU utilization is at 87.5%, and ventilator capacity is at 45%. The rolling 7-day positivity average for Potter-Randall counties is at 27%, and the positivity rate at the drive-through testing site is at 41%. The 5-day positive case average is at 227 new cases per day. And again, those are unique individuals. The public health drive-through does remain operational, and individuals can call 378-6300 to be screened and directed to the testing site. Tomorrow will be 1 week since we have been at level red. Conditions remain consistent with the level red, where at least 2 metrics must be met of those 4 metrics that we have set to be at level red. We will continue to evaluate those, as next Wednesday morning, we will either reissue another level red or move back to level orange, again, depending on our metrics that were set. GA32's hospitalization rate for our 25-county Panhandle RAC region is over 15% for 2 consecutive days now. Sunday's percentage was 15.95%, and Monday, or yesterday's percentage, was at 15.65%. We have spoken at length about what happens if our RAC region remains over 15% for 7 consecutive days, with certain establishments like restaurants and other retail stores going down to from 75 to 50% occupancy. However, we do have, if we remain over 7 days at that 15%, GA31 will go into effect. And that's where the hospitals will have to postpone elective surgeries and other procedures that are deemed elective. And they will also have to maintain at least 10% capacity for the care of COVID patients in their hospitals. These procedures are defined, those elective procedures and other procedures are defined in GA31, and we've been in touch with the hospitals so that they can prepare and plan for this event if we do stay over the 15% for 7 days. I also want to take a moment to talk about hospital capacity and what that means. When we look at the hospital's total occupancy or their total bed count, what they're licensed for instance, Northwest Texas Hospital is licensed for 595 beds. 106 of those beds are behavioral health beds. They also have NICU beds, pediatric beds, and labor and delivery beds. So many beds that can't be or wouldn't be appropriate for the care of COVID-19, like adults who have COVID-19. And so really that brings us down to about 200, a little over 200 beds at Northwest that are appropriate for the care of adults with COVID-19. And the same is true at BSA. They have just a little over, right around 300 beds that would be appropriate for the care of adults with COVID-19, which is why it's so important that locally we look at what our adult bed utilization and our ICU utilization is, because those numbers capture what that adult capacity is to care for our adults that have COVID-19. Since October 1st, we have had 36 individuals in our community pass away because of COVID-19. that's 24% of the deaths since this pandemic started on March 1st in our community. March 18th in our community. 24% of the deaths have occurred in the last 20 days. Our first cases again were 7 months ago, and in the past 20 days, we've seen more deaths and almost as many cases as in any other month since March. Since October 1st, we've had 22% of the total cases. So 22% of the total cases and 24% of the total deaths since October the 1st. So October has certainly been a very challenging month I'm pleading with our community to take this very seriously. If you're a leader, a business owner, a pastor, a parent, I'm imploring you to take precautions that are necessary to protect those in your care. The prevention steps are simple. Get a flu shot, wear a mask, stay at least 6 feet from other people, stay home if you're sick, and please, make it easy for employees to stay home if they've been exposed to someone with COVID-19. And that's really all I have today for the COVID-19 update. We are still seeing very generalized spread. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Council? Okay. Jared, other things on the coronavirus update? Casey, we appreciate your work, and it's obvious to us every week how passionate you are about it. But we appreciate that you feel safe showing us the tenderness of your heart, too.
No, ma'am. That's all we have at this time.
Okay, moving on to item 1B, Martin Road Lake improvements update. Jared.
Great. We've got a relatively concise presentation for you. We've got Kyle Sneederjohn, our Director of CIP Capital Improvements Program, here to present the item for you and then answer any questions council has. Kyle?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jared. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to share my screen as well for the presentation. Well, Stephanie, my PowerPoint presentation doesn't come up as an option to, oh, wait, I got it. Maybe so. Sorry about that, everyone. All right, here's my slideshow. Now I'm really got to be concise, Jared. All right, this is the presentation for Martin Road Lake. I'm happy to share with you guys the project completion where we're at today on our, what we call phase 2, our Dale Street portion of the project. And then likewise, what our next steps are and where we're going from here. This project, you guys have seen this timeline a couple different times, but this project has the roots back in as far back as 2013. We've got our current, kind of the current process started here in about this 4th or 5th box of March of 2019, where we re-awarded the project to our current design engineer and HDR engineers, and then began the design and ultimately construction portion of this project. June of 2019, we had some fairly significant rain events that identified some what we deemed as our early out project in Dale Street, which is what we're going to talk about having completed. But our design engineer during this entire time has been working on the master design, which is the entirety East Lake and West Lake and public amenities associated. So we've completed our water basin study and analysis. We've completed a public engagement portion that still has, that will still finish up prior to ultimate construction, but we've gone through some public engagement and sought out input from the neighborhood and surrounding stakeholders. And then November of 2019 began construction on the portion of Dale Street that I'm going to talk about subsequently. And that gets us up to current. So October of 2020 here near the right side of the screen, we have completed construction of our Dale Street portion of the project. And then as you guys are aware, right before the kind of start of fiscal year, October 1, the drainage utility bonds were issued and poised us to move forward into phase 3, the repairs to the entirety of the area and including the public amenity portion of the project, which we talk about there in those last 2 slides, February and moving forward. And those dates will come back, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the rest of the presentation. But that's the general overview. That's what we've been aimed at. and that's where we're still named. So phase two, what was phase two, and what did we do? Phase two is critical repairs to the Dale Street location. As I mentioned, we had in your upper portion there in the picture, you can see the erosion that happened in April, around April 2017 on that project were fairly significant. And we had to take some quick action and decisive action to protect the adjacent infrastructure of Dale Street and adjacent private property, houses, daycare facility in that vicinity adjacent to Dale Street. And so we put forth what we call kind of an early out project, which was taking the master plan and condensing that into a project that needed to be done first and taking off on that. That was Dale Street. So we repaired the embankment, reestablished vegetation in those areas. We installed a very large storm sewer drop structure, which I'll detail a little bit more, and also a very large concrete surface drainage flume. We installed 4 new concrete and curb inlets in Dale Street, as well as concrete storm sewer to tie those things together, and then did modifications and reconstruction of the curb and gutter on the north side of Dale Street to direct stormwater where we wanted it and contain it. Additionally, you can kind of see the alluvial deposit of silt and soil up here in the upper right-hand corner of that failure, effectively. And so we did have silt in the bottom of the lake. That was that jeopardized our overall goal of meeting our floodplain objectives, maintaining the volume of the lake. And so we took some additional steps to remove silt and debris from the bottom of the lake while we were in the bottom of the lake. So this project, again, centered around 2 major structures. The one being this large concrete flume. We got kind of before and after pictures of it at the top, which it's effectively, this structure is intended to take the surface water out of the neighborhood. And so there wasn't a lot of storm sewer in that neighborhood, but the streets flowed full, and they came to the lake in a concentrated flow. And so we capture that on the surface and maintain it on the surface until all the way down to the bottom of the lake, being the main change maybe you observed from that erosion picture before, that the structures we are constructing completely take the stormwater to the bottom of the lake. The discharge will be normally submerged under normal conditions, but this structure specifically intended to handle the surface water, basically captures it at the top and flows all the way down to the submerged condition. And then the second major structure was the structure that handles the stormwater flow. So these pipes that you see in the upper left is the stormwater system. A lot of that stormwater comes directly off of Amarillo Boulevard and is collected in pipes and stormwater system. And that's a different characteristic, because once you've got it in a pipe, there's no reason to try and put it back on the surface and allow the dirt to try and handle that kind of flow. So what we did instead is construct a structure that contains that water, and it actually drops in elevation a couple of different times within the structure, and then discharges at the bottom of the lake. And again, mostly existing conditions will end up in a submerged condition where that stormwater doesn't really ever have the opportunity to erode the surface and the side slopes of the lake. Those were the 2 main portions and main structures, main achievements of the project. Project was constructed by MH Civil Constructors, and Saul Hernandez and his crew did a fine job for us in that regard. HDR Engineers, Curtis Patel was our design engineer, and on my staff, Adam Stewart was our project manager, and they've all done an exemplary job to get us to this completion point. So the next steps, what we're calling phase 3 of the project is to continue repairs to the existing lake, to the existing facilities, as well as to reestablish a public amenity for that neighborhood and a public amenity in this area. To date, we've completed the hydraulic analysis. We've engaged the public overwhelmingly, the input that we got from the public was access to the water. Some individuals expressed that as very specifically, I want a fishing amenity. I want to be able to fish. Others, it was more dissatisfaction with the steepness of the slopes or of the existing facility or other avenues. But that access to the water is what really became a focal point in every one of our public engagement events, and so has been incorporated into a major portion of our final design. The design process is fully underway, and we expect that 90% set of construction plans available to us this February. We expect to be bidding that project out in the summer and then get to the construction phase late summer, early fall. Just a side note, that's one of our inspectors, our construction inspectors, Brad and his little friend at the City of Amarillo Parks Department Fishing Derby. And so that was part of some of the public engagement activities that we were in and at and asking questions and engaging people. This is an overall schematic of that phase 3 job. So the pink areas are basically the Dale Street completion, the portion that we've completed, and then just kind of color coding as we go through here. The East and West Lake, the blue area is always kind of the normalized water level that would be maintained in the lake, but also give us the volume that we need for stormwater capture at this level. And so then you go into the kind of Hunter Green area, which is a normal slope, pretty close to what's existing slope out there right now in those two areas. And then this lighter color green with the contours is an area that we're considering that we want to reduce that slope. We want to lay that slope back from what exists at a 4 to 6 to 1 criteria down to like a 10 to 12 to 1 criteria. A slope that's more similar to what we experience over at McDonald Lake near Walmart at 34th and Coulter. And so those two areas are significant in their scope to slope back and earthwork in that area. And then lastly, the lightest green in these areas is more like the park area. It is more grassed area. We're coordinating with the Parks Department in exactly what that looks like, whether that's a fully irrigated surface like a ball field type, or that is a more native grass or natural area. We're coordinating with what the goals and objectives of the Parks Master Plan and their amenity plan is going to be. But then lastly, to address and to specifically address that water access request and desire, the fishing amenity and or the water access pond over here in the left bottom left corner is basically a new lake, a new water lake, new feature it takes the place of an existing parking lot and vacant areas within the park, and becomes just that, becomes an accessible slope, shallow access to the water's edge, full ADA pathway around that area. It's set apart from the drainage function lake. The dashed dot line there, I guess, is along the east side of the West Lake. Is I wouldn't describe it as security, but definitely a fenced area that separates the public amenity where we want those public and engaging activities to be taking place versus more of a wilderness area that doesn't necessarily not have access, but is not encouraged access. And we're working very closely with not only Parks, but our legal team in considerations for creating attractive nuisances and or encouraging and allowing good public access to the areas that are safe and available for those types of activities. That's the bulk of what I have to present, and would love to take input and questions and comments specifically on this part or any other part of the presentation.
Council, questions for Kyle?
Kyle, I just want to say that on that, when we're looking at this last graphic, the area to the right, it just, I'm so impressed with the slides you showed. That Councilmember Powell and I had taken a tour together just in driving over that road and how dangerously close that erosion was at that time, and to see the progress that has been made since then is fantastic. Really appreciate the update. A couple of questions. One is, in the area where you're describing that new water area, less accessible, I think that's an area where from some of the previous work that it had been done, there was some leftover construction debris, some old concrete. Has all of that been removed as of today's date?
Yes, ma'am. All construction debris in that area has been removed. There was a soil that we were using as topsoil on that kind of pinkish area. We removed some topsoil and then brought it back. And so they're actually, I haven't actually been out there in literally the last week, but there was a little spool pile of some soil over there. But in general, yes, that area's been cleaned up, and there is no more construction debris for sure. And the intent of that is for part of this new amenity where it would really be attractive. That's adjacent to the corner of Charlotte and Dale, and the school right there. So we really want that to become an attractive corner, an attractive portion of the park.
And yes, I could.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Free. No, I say, Councilmember Hayes, that I have been out there several times, and you just would not believe it when you and I saw it. I mean, it's so much better now.
Great. Thank you both very much.
And Kyle, do we have any signs or anything out there that have drawings or illustrations of what the finished project might look like? This is a long project. This is not an overnight fix to a big problem. And when I saw that the construction part, the phase 3 construction to start in 2021 with the fall, something so that people who drive through there, maybe the neighborhood knows kind of the timeline, maybe they don't. Other people who drive through there, that we have images of the design, the final product, with something like, coming fall 2021, with just that communication and managing expectations to say, we're not done yet. This isn't the final thing. And we're still several months away, but we are making progress.
We do not. Wonderful idea, and I'll see what we can get accomplished on that in that regard.
Kyle,
I even thought, Kyle, that. Go ahead, Frida.
I was going to say, Kyle, maybe we could do something similar to what's being done over in the North Heights area as far as the signage is concerned and the communications.
Yes, ma'am.
And I even thought, Kyle, when the slide right before this one had the combination of the picture and the steps left with the approximate dates for completing those steps, I thought that would make a great sign. I was going to make the same comment. Could we get some signs up so that people would know things are in the works and what the plan is?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I think we can absolutely achieve that, and great input.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the council?
One comment. One of the meetings I went to over in that area, people expressed an interest in being able to fish. So are we going to stock that lake with fish?
Yes, sir. We actually have a fisheries expert on our design team, and his input to the volume and the size and even shape of that amenity are geared towards a maintainable fishing amenity. Right now, the design is for that to be a freshwater supplemented lake. We want to try to maintain the water level as much as we possibly can naturally, but we all know that we have stints where that will become problematic, and so we'll have some options to supplement the lake, the fishing lake, with some freshwater options. And yes, the intention there is that it is designed well to be maintained well as a fishing stock pond.
That's awesome. If we can have that on the sign somewhere too. I'm kind of kidding, kind of not. I mean, if it ends up with something, I mean, I think I think the neighborhood's going to be very excited to hear that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much, Kyle. Ready to move on, I think, to the next item on the agenda, which is item 1C, an update on our zoning code revision project. Mr. City Manager.
We've got Andrew Freeman, our Managing Director of Economic Development and Development Services, Planning and Economic Development and Development Services. And he's going to introduce the item. We've got our consultants that are working on the zoning code rewrite with us, and they're going to be making a brief presentation, 15 minutes or so, and then we'll be answering questions from council. Andrew, take it away.
Yes, sir. As council recalls, we kicked off the zoning code revision project with the public back in June of 2019. We're starting to come toward the later stages of the revisions. We've got our Module 3 meetings taking place today. We met with Planning and Zoning this morning. We'll have our subcommittee meeting this afternoon, a public meeting at 7 p.m. tonight to go over more details in Module 3. I've got Tyson Smith and Kelly Cousineau with White & Smith, our consulting firms, to give you a brief update, more of a high level. And then if you are interested, we have posted a potential quorum notice for tonight's meeting. If any of you would like to come and listen to more details or have any specific questions, we're able to answer those. So I'll ask Tyson to go ahead.
Okay, very good. Good afternoon. Good to see you all again. Sorry we're having to do this virtually still, but we are making progress on the code. In fact, we're in the third module, as Andrew said. Things seem to be going very well. We're getting good responses. I'm going to introduce the project mainly to remind everyone where we've been. And then I'm going to ask Kelly Cousineau, who's been the primary drafter of this code, to go through the details of Module 3 with you, and as Andrew said, at a high level. Hope you'll join us later tonight at the public meeting if you want to get it all in more detail. I'll go ahead and switch over to screen share. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions as we go along, but I'll pause before turning it over to Kelly for that as well. Most of you will remember that we kicked this off in June of 2019. We had kickoff meetings over a period of 2 days, and we launched our public outreach plan at that point as well. This has been scheduled to be about an 18-month project. And in September, we returned there to go over our assessment, which was a written verification and explanation of the areas of the ordinance that either someone in the community, on the council, the P&Z, or staff had requested that we look at, or areas of the code that we looked at ourselves and decided we should bring them to your attention to consider changes for. So we went over that in September, and then we started the drafting process. And you'll recall we were with you in person in February to present Module 1, and then with you virtually in June to go over Module 2, and that gets us Module 3, where we are now. Module 1 was really laying the groundwork in the zoning ordinance. We covered the executive summary and the introduction, but the real heart of that effort was the zoning districts, the use table, and the use regulations. As you can imagine, that really provides the base of the zoning ordinance itself, and then we build on that in Module 2. Primary part of that was development standards. So we covered things like parking, landscaping, fences and walls, those sorts of provisions. It also included changes to, or the addition of a historic preservation overlay district. That left us at Module 3, which is primarily administrative procedures, including in that, of course, is non-conformities. That's an area of interest for everyone. How do we move from the current code into the new code, protect property rights, while also trying to implement the new provisions over time. But also, Kelly will cover BYOB venues and BYOB events. This is an area that hasn't gotten a lot of treatment under the current zoning code, but is an area of land use that has come up as an issue in the community. So we want to try to address that with the new revisions. There were some minor changes to the airport overlay district, and Kelly will touch on those as well. So I'm going to turn it over to her. Are there any questions about where we've been and how we got here while she's pulling the screen up?
Tyson, you may have already said this, but on your timeline, did you state an anticipated completion date?
I was going to touch on that at the end of the process.
Okay,
but,
that's fine.
Well, it's no reason not to touch on it now since I'm before you. The plan has been by the end of this year. We're still on track for the most part, but we're going to get a finalized draft, which will basically be combining all 3 modules to staff for final review. They've been reviewing it, of course, probably in the first week or so of November, could be the second week in November. At that point, staff will need probably at least a month to review it. So I would say the best case scenario is we get this to P&Z and to you in December, but that a stretch into January or so may be more realistic.
Well, I honestly didn't realize we were that close. I remember having these conversations and just, one of the things of understanding the pace that government moves and when the size and scope of a project like this, and just, it was so far away. And to see that we are, actually seeing light at the end of the tunnel, how close this is, that I'm very encouraged.
Okay, excellent. Kelly will, by the way, that leads me to another thought. Kelly will touch on where you can find all the documents from the entire project, including Module 3, on the city website. I want to make sure you notice that we have something called Module 3 overview, and we have that for each of the modules, so you can read in sort of a small memo, generally speaking, the areas that we changed or addressed during that module. There's also a spreadsheet that has been tracking all along called the revisions tracking spreadsheet, and that's posted, and Kelly can point out that to you as well. That will be an easier way probably to go through section by section what's changed, so you can really focus in on it and make sure you're seeing everything. I know it's a ton of information. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kelly.
Thanks, Tyson. Good afternoon, Mayor Nelson and council members. I'm going to take you through a high-level overview of Module 3. As Tyson mentioned, it's mostly administrative provisions, legal provisions, and procedures. So it covers all of the articles listed here, Articles 5 through 11 of the zoning ordinance. And then in addition, there's 2 special topics that we've been working on with staff, BYOB venues and events, and the airport overlay. So these are some of the most significant changes on this list. The first 6 are part of those articles that were listed on the previous slide, and then the last 2 are those special topics that go in the use regulations and the zoning districts articles. I'll start with consolidated procedures. So this article consolidates all of the zoning related procedures into the single article It largely carries forward existing requirements and clarifies or augments those where needed. The first section of the article establishes some general rules for the procedures that apply to multiple procedures, such as pre-application conferences and notice requirements. And then the next section describes the process for each specific land use decision, for example, rezonings and variances. And those specific procedures generally share this common workflow that's indicated on the right. Most of those categories are self-explanatory, but they basically walk an applicant through the process, for example, going for a rezoning, when that process applies, how you make application, how the city determines it's complete, whether public notice is required, and then it goes through the detailed approval process, describing which boards and commissions review, who makes the decision. There's a list of specific approval criteria, and then some final sections dealing with reapplication for withdrawn or denied applications, how an applicant could appeal a decision they don't agree with. Scope of approval is what the application authorizes, sort of the next steps in the process. And then some specific procedures like SUPs require a specific record keeping process, and where that's required, that's indicated in this article as well. We did add a new procedure for comprehensive plan amendments. This section describes how the city could amend the text of the comprehensive plan or the future land use map, but it also authorizes or allows a property owner to request an amendment to the comprehensive plan, future land use, and character map for their property. It does require a concurrent rezoning application for consistency. And I'll touch on fees in a moment, but we did add a fee for this application that's consistent with the fee for a rezoning application. We've also consolidated all of the submittal requirements into Article 11. We've added a new requirement for traffic impact analysis, which I'll talk about on the next slides. We've built in the ability for the review and decision-making bodies to require technical reports and studies for more complex applications, and I'll touch on that in a moment as well. We've also consolidated all of the application requirements into this giant matrix that's shown on the right side of the screen here, and the final version that's incorporated into the zoning ordinance will include just those applications that go to a board, a commission, or city council for review. Anything that's administratively reviewed and approved, those checklists will be maintained outside the code so staff can update those as needed. I mentioned fees. They've been consolidated in the submittal requirements chapter as well. There was only one fee change, and that was pertaining to the Historic Preservation Overlay District. Because that's essentially a special type of rezoning, we've increased the fee to match what is required for the rezoning. So the traffic impact analysis is a new submittal requirement that implements two comprehensive plan strategies. It's required for specific use permit applications, rezonings to a planned district, as well as site plans. And the threshold is 100 peak hour vehicle trips, and that the peak hour is measured either as the peak hour when there's the most traffic on the adjacent street, or the peak hour of the land use itself, whichever is higher. So anything that has less than 100 peak hour vehicle trips is required to submit a trip generation memo, which is essentially just information for the review and decision-making bodies, give some background about the development and the potential trip generation from the development. More than 100 peak hour vehicle trips results in a level 2 traffic impact study, which is a much more detailed quantitative analysis of the anticipated impacts on the transportation system from a particular development. And one component of that level 2 TIA is a mitigation plan. So there would be recommended transportation improvements, just a traffic signal that would be caused by the demand, would be caused by the proposed development. And so this requirement, or the traffic impact assessment, would require the developer to construct those improvements that are attributable to traffic generated from that particular development. You can see some examples here on the right of what 100 peak hour trips looks like in terms of dwelling units and square feet. And these are just estimates based on the latest trip generation manual from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. With some applications, the procedures that are in Article 5 of the code are really designed for the typical applications that you see. And on occasion, the city will see applications for more complex applications, things that may arouse a higher level of citizen interest, that the typical evaluation application process just doesn't give the review and decision-making bodies enough information to make a decision on the application. So this section allows for rezonings to a plan district, SUPs, certificates of appropriateness, and variances. It allows the review and decision-making bodies to require an applicant to submit a technical report or study related to the application that, again, will enable the review and decision-making bodies to comply with the approval criteria for the particular application. The technical reports are specifically defined, and they are this list on the right-hand side. The expert real estate evaluation is a current requirement for SUPs, and it continues to be a requirement for SUPs. But now the council and commissions will have the ability to request that or other special studies for different types of applications. Non-conformities. The current code addresses non-conforming uses and lots, but not structures or site improvements. So we've added provisions pertaining to those types of non-conformities. I wanted to go through the 4 major changes in this section. The first being the reduction of the abandonment period for non-conforming uses from 1 year to 6 months. So if a non-conforming use is discontinued for more than 6 months, then any new use that's established there would have to be in compliance with the current zoning ordinance. We've also adjusted the damage threshold. So non-conforming structures in the airport overlay district that are damaged by more than 50% of their structural value must be brought into compliance with the code. The current threshold in the city's airport zoning regulations is 60%. And then the current threshold in the zoning ordinance is 50%. So this reduction is just bringing the areas in the airport overlay district in line with the areas outside of the overlay district. We've added an automatic 10% building setback reduction for non-conforming lots to help encourage infill development. And then we've specified when non-conforming site improvements such as parking or landscaping have to be brought into compliance with the revised code. So anytime a building is altered to where the floor area or for a restaurant, the usable seating area is increased by more than 3,000 square feet or 35% of gross floor area, whichever is less, or when the number of off-street parking spaces is increased by more than 35%. At that time, someone would have to bring any non-conforming site improvements into compliance. Anything less than those thresholds, they would not be required to bring the site improvements into compliance. And again, that helps with redevelopment. Okay, and let me pause there before I go into BYOBs and the airport overlay to see if there are any questions.
Kelly, I have
Go ahead, Elaine.
Go ahead.
As you're noting all of those things, the applicant traffic impact study or whatever, the cost of that would fall on the applicant asking for the special use permit or whatever they're applying for. Is that right?
That's correct.
That was my only question. Thank you.
My question is related to, as we're redoing those, and especially if you could go back to that last slide you were on, Kelly, to find out, are we moving our zoning more restrictive, less restrictive for the builder? Is it just that this is more clarification and you wouldn't necessarily term it more restrictive? I want to be sure that as we go through this, that we're not making it harder. on our development community to comply with what the requirements are.
Tyson, are you going to jump in there, or do you want me to take that?
I can. Ms. Hayes, were you talking specifically about the traffic impact analysis or in general?
In general, it was more on that next slide, not the traffic impact, but it was with the parking and kind of what triggers things of when they have to come into compliance. Sure. And I'm guessing that's when with like already existing properties then that are being renovated, that people do get caught up kind of in that. It's an old property, zoning has changed, and they want to come in and fix up an old property, but it's pretty cost prohibitive when you have to bring everything up to current day zoning code.
Well, it could be. That's right. So I think to answer the question, let me just put it this way. You look at nonconformities, at one end of the spectrum, we have something called amortization, which would mean that if you adopted something like that, that property owners have to proactively go bring their properties into compliance, even if they're not making any changes that they want to make. That's a pretty extreme view. At the far end, you would say, well, when you come in for changes, unless you're basically doing a complete redevelopment, you don't have to come into compliance with the new code. So that would be a situation where, you have a retail establishment and they're replacing it 90%, but you say, well, since it wasn't 100%, you don't have to come into compliance with the new code. I would say what you're doing is something in the middle. You're trying to be reasonable to say, for example, if you reduce the amount of use or you remove the current use by 50%, for example, or these thresholds, you have to come into compliance. But what I would say is, typically speaking, and I'll ask Kelly or staff to remind me if I'm missing something, typically speaking, coming into compliance wouldn't, I don't think in most cases in terms of the changes we made, be that radical. To balance that, though, what we've done is on the next slide. Never mind, it's on this slide, on this presentation. You can see that fourth bullet point is we've tried to allow some setback. This isn't in the current code, some automatic reduction of 10% on non-conforming. And the final thing I'll say is, one thing that is more restrictive, if the council goes with it, is that second bullet point. Because today, you can discontinue a use for 364 days, start it back the next day, even if it's non-conforming, and that's okay. So that's a legitimate way to approach things. But if you want to sort of advance the implementation of your new code, you would move maybe to 6 months. And say if you've got a non-conforming use and you discontinue it for 6 months, the new use has to be in conformity with the code. So there's no magic to one or the other. It's just sort of where the community wants to go.
And can you explain what the automatic 10% building setback reduction for non-conforming lots means in layman's term?
Oh, in that case, no. I'll let Kelly do it.
Sure. So if, for example, your lot width is non-conforming, say the minimum width in the zoning district is 50 feet and your lot is 40 feet, you can get an automatic 10% reduction in your side setbacks because the width of your lot is smaller than the minimum. And then the opposite would be true if your lot depth is non-conforming. You could get a 10% reduction in the front and rear setbacks to kind of help offset that difference.
So that's automatic, and then if they want to appeal that for a larger amount, I'm guessing that's addressed somewhere else in your policies.
Yes, that would be a variance through the zoning board of adjustment.
Okay.
So Kelly, can I ask you a question real quick also? So in this, I know that you've talked about the airport overlay. I know earlier within the past couple of years, we've considered an I-40 overlay, kind of like the I-35 overlay down in the Metroplex, and also considering the TPED that we're trying to see get put together. Has there been any consideration, because there's going to be a lot of non-conformity issues that are going to come up, especially if we can we want to dress up the I-40 corridor that goes through town. We want to make it so people want to stop. And so part of that is coming up with an I-40 overlay that basically has got some requirements. And so how does this fit in with the non-conformities? And did you all consider that in your setup for what's going on?
We have not proposed an overlay district for I-40 in what we've done. The same non-conformity provisions would apply in any newly enacted overlay district. Of course, I would assume if there were a desire to have different non-conformity standards for a particular geographic area like that overlay district, that overlay district specifically could allow for different abandonment periods, for example.
Okay, so there would be a way for that to be put into place so that we can move forward and be successful with that.
Yes.
Okay. I guess you'll kind of explain that as we get into this a little further, or will that be more of something for this evening?
I explain what a little more further.
Exactly how that would end up working. How would we be able to make that fit within this zoning rewrite, or will it fit within this zoning rewrite?
The overlay district you mentioned?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sure. It's not something that we have done so far, but it certainly could be easily inserted into the zoning ordinance if the city decides to go that route. There's a section in Article 2 for overlay districts. It includes the airport overlay and a couple of others, so it could be added right in behind those.
Okay.
Any other questions for Kelly? Okay, Kelly.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right, the last couple of things are these special topics. As Tyson mentioned, BYOB events and venues are an emerging land use in the city that the zoning ordinance does not currently address. So we've proposed two different uses: a BYOB event, which is a temporary use subject to the same regulations as other temporary uses. That would be one event per year per site. Those events are allowed in the central business district, light and heavy commercial, and both the industrial districts. Event hours would be limited from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. And a staff level site plan approval is required. And if the event is open to the general public, it also requires approval by the Environmental Health Department in the same manner as they currently review and approve special events. Then BYOB venues are a principal use. So essentially anywhere that has more than one BYOB event per year is considered a BYOB venue. It requires a specific use permit, and it's allowed in the same districts where BYOB events are allowed, which is also the same districts where bars, for example, are allowed. The SUP approval is valid for 1 year, and it may be renewed through a staff level approval process if the application is submitted at least 45 days before the expiration, the venue is still in compliance with all of the applicable requirements and standards, and the venue doesn't have any pending violations or enforcement actions with the city. Anything outside of that would require a new SUP approval by City Council. BYOB venues must close every day from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. and that's consistent with Texas alcohol laws. As part of the SUP application process, the applicant is required to submit a public safety plan that addresses, at a minimum, on-site security as well as fire safety for attendees. BYOB venues are also required to meet all of the use regulations that are applicable to event venues, which is another new use that we've added. And that requires an operational plan as well as maintenance of an on-site manager. So anytime the venue is open, there should be an on-site manager there to make sure that all of these standards are being complied with. And Well, let me ask if there's any questions there before I run over the airport overlay district. Not seeing any, so I will go on to this last portion. So the airport overlay district is a new zoning district, an overlay district, obviously, that carries forward and updates the current airport regulations that are in Chapter 409 of the City Code. This is the only part of the zoning ordinance that applies outside the city limits in the ETJ. You can see that map on the right, the red outline is the city limits. So quite a bit of the airport overlay is located outside of it. We have updated the GIS information, so this overlay district can be shown on the zoning map. So this blue outline is the outermost boundary of the airport overlay district, and within that there are a few different zones. Two are current zones that we've updated and carried forward, and then one is new. So what's new is a wildlife hazard zone. This is a 5-mile radius around the airport boundary, which is consistent with Federal Aviation Administration guidance. This was implemented to address a concern from airport staff about land uses that could potentially attract wildlife. Landfills is a great example. Birds can become a hazard to pilots. So the regulations don't prohibit the establishment of land uses that could attract wildlife in this area, but it does trigger a review by airport staff to determine whether or not it could be a hazard. The two existing zones are the noise zones, which we've updated the noise contours to be consistent with the current airport master plan, and that the regulations associated with noise zones just limit noise sensitive land uses in those areas, for example, residential uses, schools. And then the final zone are the height hazard zones, which encompass the approaches and departures to the airport. And those also have been updated with the most current information from the airport. And height of both structures and vegetation trees is limited in that. But there's nothing that would prohibit somebody from building up to 50 feet in the airport overlay district. But when you get beyond that, that triggers the review by the airport to determine whether that height is okay in the proposed location. And that is it for me. I'm happy to answer any final questions.
Nothing, Council? I guess, Kelly, just thinking about it, I think part of what, I might be speaking out of turn, Eddie, but just hearing about an overlay district for the airport, I think it is very important to this council that we also have something like that along I-40. And I don't know if that's where you were coming with on your questions, Eddie, but yeah, I think that's very important. And maybe you guys can better educate us on whether or not that is appropriate to be talked about now, or whether we need to approve this zoning ordinance and move on to talk about how we get that in place. But it's really years overdue, and every new business that starts up along I-40 is a business that will have to wait decades in order to catch it back up. So I think as far as time sensitivity, we feel like we're way behind on catching up.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it needs to be sooner than later.
And Andrew, that maybe I want to put Kelly on the hot seat.
Yeah, and I was thinking, is that more the previous discussion we've had as far as like architectural standards and masonry? Because we had talked about that in the past, and that's what the state legislature kind of took out of our hands, where the cities aren't allowed to require anything extra to be an overlay, like some I-35 corridor cities were able to do in the past.
I'm thinking sidewalks and trees.
Yeah, sidewalks, trees. Okay. Okay. Additional standards as far as those in the landscape area.
I mean, and signs. I mean, you know, how do we do signs along that corridor so that it's consistent and attractive? And I agree. I wish we could also address those type of building exteriors, but I think we understand that's not really an option for us. But I don't think that means we want to do nothing, since we can't do everything.
Yeah, I do, and I think we really do have to kind of talk about that, because I still hear that from time to time from residents in town of what's happening with I-40 or I-27 for that matter that's occurring that's going to help us dress up Amarillo. I mean, we've talked about it, that it's the entryway to our community, and so that we need to do the very best we can to put our best foot forward so we get people to want to stop and to take part of Amarillo and enjoy it and see the things that we have to offer. And so, I think it's to dress up that entrance into town would be very important. So I don't know if now's the time or when's the time to try and place an overlay in place or have the provisions for it, so that this is one of the things that's been talked about, I know, for at least the past 4 years.
We can regroup with Tyson and Kelly and see if there's some way we can integrate it now, or come up with a good approach for it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And along with that, Andrew, maybe just an updated report of what the options even are, to kind of know what the legislature removed from local authority and what's even still on the table as options.
Absolutely.
Andrew loves making presentations to the council. He always leaves with a lot of homework.
Yeah, really.
That's what it means to be a star pupil, Andrew.
Job security.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Kelly, Tyson, things to add? I don't know that we have more questions, do we, council? Okay, so I'm not seeing any yes questions there, but any final comments from either of you?
Ma'am, I think we covered what we wanted to cover, and we'll see you again sometime around December.
Okay, great. Thank you. Andrew, thank you for the work on this project.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Item 1D is to discuss the MPO multimodal plan, and I'm going to pass that to the city manager and Councilmember Sauer.
Hi, Mayor. Thank you. We've got a one-slide presentation. Stephanie, if you can throw that up for us. Presentation is probably too big of a word, but just wanted a slide to kind of guide what we're talking about, and then allow Dr. Sauer and possibly Mayor Nelson to add to what we're talking about on the Metropolitan Planning Organization. We have me, we have Mayor Nelson, and we also have Dr. Sauer as representatives for the city of Amarillo on it. Right now, we are undertaking a regional plan, and a multimodal plan just talks about different modes of transportation and planning for those different modes of transportation inside the footprint of the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So it does an analysis of existing conditions. What are the different modes of transport, resources for different modes of transportation? What are the different assets from a bike and pedestrian transportation standpoint? What are the resources from a vehicular standpoint? And while we think of ourselves as primarily a vehicular-based transportation network, we are also concurrently utilizing numerous other modes of transportation, and that's why we're looking at a multimodal plan. So we want a well-connected network of thoroughfares, and that's the ultimate goal of a regional multimodal plan, is to make sure that as we grow and as we develop, we are also addressing our transportation needs through that development process. So we want to develop safe facilities for all modes of transportation, bicycle, pedestrian, and an integrated transit network. So as part of that process, we are also soliciting public input to that. So we have a survey out. We're going to have open houses beginning in January. We don't have a date set yet, but it's important that if you have an opinion on any mode of transportation, certainly if you have an opinion on pedestrian or bike trails or anything like that, that you submit your input through this link, engage Amarillo in Motion, to provide input and to participate in the survey process so that our consultants can incorporate that input into the plan, or at least be able to record that input and that need. So Dr. Sauer or Mayor Nelson, the reason this is on here is because, and we have Travis Muno available to us. He's also the Metropolitan Planning Organization Director. He's available to answer any questions you might have or counsel that you might have that would be specific to Travis. But from an MPO standpoint, we need the input of our community. And that's why this is on here, because we want to highlight the need and the opportunity. Dr. Sauer?
Yes, thanks, Jared. So the one reason that I kind of brought this up, and I wanted to make for sure that we got to discuss this, was actually addressed a little bit last week, actually in the Parks and Rec presentation, and I completely missed it in there. And I'm at these meetings every week, at City Council, and I completely missed that. I think it's really crucial that we, again, address the fact that we need all the input that we can possibly garner, because, Councilmember Smith has been on the Bike and Pedestrian Committee, and so there's lots of changes. People want this to become a town that's going to be bike friendly, pedestrian friendly. Give us the opportunity to be able to have those things available to us. And we need all of these people to get involved by filling out this survey. One of the things that really caught me by surprise is this survey has been open for several months. And up to this point in time, as of last week when we met, last Thursday afternoon, there had been only 100 people that have responded so far. And so for a city of 200,000, and then if you'll look on that map that's up there, that basically gives you the highlight of what our, I'm sorry, the words are missing me. What is this district? The MPO, the Metropolitan Planning District that we have right here, that actually also incorporates Canyon and the areas all around. So that's a very big area with a large number of people, and we don't have very many people that have responded. The thing that also caught my mind is the fact that in the pedestrian rise, we need things that are going to be people that want to be on trails or do those kind of things. They need to be on here and giving their input, because we need to know what this multimodal plan really needs to look like. And it's one of the best ways that you can have an effect upon what's actually planned for our area. And so I think it's really important that we get this out, that those that are wanting hiking and biking, those that are interested in making sure that the bicycle and pedestrian part of our community have safe ability to get around town, and that it's interconnected and that it all works together. We need your input. And so please go and fill out the survey. I think it's going to be very important. And then keep your eyes out for the public open houses that are going to come up, so you can go make yourself known again. It's real important, because this is also the Text Dot's going to be there. All of the people that are going to be involved with moving this plan forward, and these are people that you can influence by giving them your opinion. So I think it's real important, and we need to make it a priority if we're going to develop the Amarillo area and make it more accommodating for everybody who's living in this area. Then these are things that we've got to become a part of, and we've got to do. I think it's really important.
I couldn't agree more.
More informational than anything else.
Thank you, Eddie, for getting this.
So do you have the next meeting already scheduled? Do you know when those are going to be, or is that yet to be announced?
As far as the public, the open house for the multimodal plan, we don't have the date set. We know that it's going to be in January. That's what we've been told. Our consultants are putting that together. So once we have the date, we will push that out to council. We'll also push that out through our communications department, and we'll have Travis coordinate with communications once we have that ready to push out.
Okay, thank you.
Jared, can we use our local contacts as far as the Runners Club and the Biking Club? Can we ask them to push it out to their membership? Because I think those groups of people would be most interested.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll have my team and Travis coordinate so that we can push that out to those contacts. I don't know exactly who those people are, but I know we have people that know them through our Parks Department and through our Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Committee, so we can get that information out.
Okay, great.
So if I can just add one little thing about how this ends up working is I can remember when we went on council, and one of the very first open houses was for a section of the loop that's being done. And I remember seeing a couple of guys that were on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Committee. They were there talking to the guys, and I was listening and going, yes, these are things that we really need to be a part of, and these things need to be done. And the guys at TxDOT very kindly said, I wish you had have spoken up earlier, because now it's basically too late for us to go back and to put this in. We are at step C, and we needed you at step A to have put your input in. And so that's the thing that kind of makes me want to put this on the front burner, is we don't want to get to step C and say, dang it, I wish we had have been there. This is step A right here. This is where input is really crucial, and it's real critical. If we want to see our community develop a little bit more and be bicycle friendly, be pedestrian friendly, hiking and biking and trails, those kind of things, this is where it's going to be really important for us to get out and make for sure that we've got people placing their opinions so that we can have that influence with TxDOT, because TxDOT's open to make those kind of moves. We just got to give them the information at the right time.
I think it's difficult for anybody that does not work in the TxDOT world to understand the event horizon, the planning horizon for projects, just how far in advance your input has to be provided for it to be incorporated into the plan. I think a good example is the pedestrian and bicycle trails that are included in the Loop 335 project, specifically over on Helium, that section of 335. It's on the infrastructure is only on one side of the highway, or at least that's what was planned. And when we asked them, well, we want it on both sides of the highway, they said, well, the opportunity for input that would have guided that happened, it was like 5 years prior to the point where we were discussing it, or we were planning it and designing it. What we're talking about right now, the input that people provide are going to be incorporated into projects that will take place over the next 15 years, and probably won't start for 5 or 6 years. So it's important to understand just how long range the planning is from a TxDOT standpoint, certainly from an MPO standpoint, Metropolitan Planning Organization standpoint. So it's very important that we get the input, and that input is visionary.
Yeah, to kind of back you up on that one, Jared, is the last meeting, we're talking about the 10-year outlook for the MPO. And the plan is there's a $311 million spend that's going to occur in our area, especially on the Loop and on several other projects. But some of those projects, they don't even let or start for another 5 years, but they're project number 5 or project number 6 on the top 10 projects. And so it really was eye-opening to understand exactly how far in advance this planning is going out. And the impact that we're having right now may not actually even be realized for 5 to 10 years. So that's why I think it's real important for us to, every chance we get, to say what we want to have happen, to see happen.
Right.
Could you go back to that map on the screen? This map is that the area that's involved, or does it go farther north?
No, that's the full footprint of the Metropolitan Planning Organization. It did expand over the course of the last 18 months or so, but that is the full MPO.
Yeah, wasn't it 18 months ago, Canyon wasn't technically
correct
the MPO?
And it spread, it incorporated some of the lakes areas and to the west.
I don't know when we're going to be able to get the crossbar open, but it'd be nice if it went as far as the Canadian River.
And that'll be something that we can consider as population centers grow to the expand to the north. Typically with the MPO, they're trying to capture population centers. So the areas that they expanded to showed significant growth between now and the previous boundary reconsideration. So Bushland, the Canyon Lakes areas, and Canyon were the primary adds this time, because that's where much of the growth that occurred between the last boundary consideration and this most recent one, or between previous boundary considerations and this most recent one. We would probably need to see some population growth up to our north in order to do that, but that's certainly something we can do, and that probably will happen.
And Jared, isn't there some point in time when we move from an MPO to the next level up, which is the top level, the TPO?
We're doing that. That'll happen very soon. Travis might want to jump in and speak to that, when that's going to happen. Travis?
Yeah, it's based on the 2020 census. As soon as Amarillo goes, the urbanized area in Amarillo goes over 200,000, that's when we will become a TMA, which is a transportation management area. Okay. And those numbers, right now they're trying to cut it short on the counting, but it'll probably be at least a year and a half or so before we know those numbers.
Yeah, but the fact of adding Canyon into the whole thing automatically almost kicks us over, doesn't it, Travis?
Yeah, pretty much guarantee us.
Yeah, we were only like 3,000 short at the last census, so I'm sure we've gone way over that.
So what additional advantages does a TMA provide us over an MPO?
It'll allow us access to some additional funds.
Category funds.
Yeah, there's a Category 7, which is for the transportation management areas only. Plus, there's also some additional transportation alternative money and some things like that.
So do those kind of things let us then maybe move things forward as we're developing the loop around Amarillo?
Some of them will be like transportation alternative. That'll be strictly for like pedestrian or bicycle stuff. But
good.
The Category 7 we can use on anything that pretty much that we want to do. We could use it on loop or access trails or anything like that.
Anything else then on that? Really glad that y'all brought that, Jared and Eddie. It's a good thing for us to be mindful of. Okay, anything else? So item 1E is to request future agenda items. Anybody have something they need on next week or a future agenda?
We will have had an environmental task force meeting this Thursday. We can get a report on that, and also pedestrian bicycle safety committee meets next Monday.
Okay. Those?
A follow-up discussion on the Wayfair signs. We have one up to be able to give feedback. I don't know if that's already scheduled at some point.
We can get information on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I haven't driven by it yet, but I think, Jared, that was in your last report. Down on Buchanan, right by the post office in Hodgetown, they have a mock-up. I'm going to go stand by it and get my picture taken and see how big they really are. See if I can get on a ladder and see the top of it.
pretty neat.
All right, then we will, that finishes us on our non-executive agenda. So Brian, if you don't mind reading our dismissal language.
Be glad to. Pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act, closed session of the Amarillo City Council was announced on October the 20th, 2020 at 2:31 p.m. Under the following authorities: Section 551.087, discuss commercial financial information received from an existing business or business prospect from which the city is negotiating for the location or retention of a facility, or for incentives the city is willing to extend, or financial information submitted by the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. We are adjourned on this part of our agenda, and I'll see the council in executive session. Thank you all.